Free speech is the only way to acquire knowledge about the world. Perhaps the greatest discovery in human history, one that is logically prior to every other discovery, is that all of our traditional sources of belief are in fact generators of error and should be dismissed as sources of knowledge. These include faith, revelation, dogma, authority, charisma, augury, prophecy, intuition, clairvoyance, conventional wisdom, and that warm, invigorating glow of subjective certainty. How then can we know? Other than by proving mathematical and logical theorems, which are not about the material world, the answer is the process that Karl Popper called conjecture and refutation. We come up with ideas about the nature of reality, and then we test those ideas against that reality, allowing the world to falsify the mistaken ones. The conjecture part of this formula, of course, presupposes the exercise of free speech. We offer conjectures without any prior assurance that they are correct. It's only by brooding ideas and seeing which ones withstand attempts to refute them that we acquire knowledge. Once this realization sank in during the scientific revolution, the Age of Reason, and the Enlightenment, the traditional understanding of the world was decimated. Everyone knows that the discovery that the Earth revolves around the sun rather than vice versa had to overcome fierce resistance from common sense and ecclesiastical authority. But the Copernican revolution was just the first event in a cataclysm that would make our current understanding of the world unrecognizable to our ancestors. We know that the belief systems of all the world's traditional religions and cultures, their theories of the origins of life, humans, and societies, are factually mistaken. We know, but our ancestors did not, that humans belong to a single species of African primate that developed agriculture, government, and writing late in its history. We know that our species is a tiny twig of a genealogical tree that embraces all living things and that emerged from prebiotic chemicals almost 4 billion years ago. We know that we live on a planet that revolves around one of 100 billion stars in our galaxy, which is one of 100 billion galaxies in a 13.8 billion year old universe, possibly one of a vast number of universes. We know that our intuitions about space, time, matter, and causation are incommensurable with the nature of reality on scales that are very large and very small. We know that the laws governing the physical world, including accidents, disease, and other misfortunes, have no goals that pertain to human well-being. That is, there is no such thing as fate, providence, karma, spells, curses, augury, divine retribution, or answered prayers, though the discrepancy between the laws of probability and the workings of cognition may explain why so many people believe there are. And we know that we did not always know these things, that the beloved convictions of every time and culture may be decisively falsified, doubtless including some we hold today. Free speech was not just central to the development of knowledge in the history of humanity. It may be central to the development of knowledge in any intelligent species. A third reason that free speech is foundational to human flourishing is that it is essential to democracy and a bulwark against tyranny. The most pressing historical question of the 20th century is how monstrous totalitarian regimes, particularly those of Stalin, Hitler, Mao, and Imperial Japan, came into existence. Fascist and communist regimes came to power through violent intimidation. In every case, groups of armed fanatics used violence to silence or intimidate their critics and adversaries. Even the apparently democratic election of the Nazis in 1933 was preceded by years of intimidation, murder, and violent mayhem. And once in power, totalitarians criminalize any criticism of the regime. There's a systematic reason why dictators brook no dissent. The immiserated subjects of a tyrannical regime are not deluded that they are happy. And if tens of millions of disaffected citizens act together, no regime has the brute force to resist them. The reason that citizens don't resist their overlords en masse is that they lack what logicians call common knowledge, The knowledge that everyone else shares their knowledge. Not just that I know something and you know something, but I know that you know it, and I know that you know that I know that you know it, and you know that I know that you know it, and so on. Common knowledge is a prerequisite to coordinating behavior for mutual benefit. Two friends will show up at the same cafe at a given time only if each one knows that the other knows that both know that the other knows about the appointment. Now, in the case of civil resistance, people will expose themselves to the risk of reprisal by a despotic regime only if they know that others are exposing themselves to that risk at the same time and that the others know that they know. Indeed, in computer simulations of artificial societies, the sociologist Michael Macy has shown that open channels of communication are essential in preventing unpopular beliefs, those that no one believes but that no one dares deny, from becoming entrenched. If true believers can punish skeptics in these computer simulations, then a minority view can take over. But if skeptics can sample the beliefs of their compatriots, then collective delusions will tend to unravel. Now, the common knowledge that emboldens collective action is created by public information, like a broadcasted statement. The story of the emperor's new clothes illustrates the logic. When the little boy shouted that the emperor was naked, he was not telling the crowd anything that they didn't already know, anything they couldn't see with their own eyeballs. But he was changing the state of their knowledge nonetheless, because now everyone knew that everyone else knew that everyone else knew that the emperor was naked. And that common knowledge, in this technical sense, emboldened them to challenge the emperor's authority with their laughter. The story, as well as illustrating the convoluted logic of common knowledge in an easily grasped example, also shows us why humor is no laughing matter. Why satire and ridicule, even when puerile and tasteless, are terrifying to autocrats and protected by democracies. Satire can stealthily challenge assumptions that are second nature to an audience by forcing them to see that those assumptions lead to consequences that everyone recognizes are absurd. And that's why humor so often has served as an accelerant to social progress. Now, we use barbed speech to undermine not just political leaders, but the petty oppressors of everyday life. The tyrannical boss, the sanctimonious preacher, the blowhard at the bar, the neighborhood enforcer of stifling norms. Now, granted, it may seem outlandish to link an issue that we are parochially concerned with, American campus freedom, which by historical and global standards is still admirably high, to the world's brutal regimes. But the connection is not that far-fetched. A few months ago, I addressed the Oslo Freedom Forum, a kind of TED for political dissidents. I met people who escaped from North Korea by walking across the Gobi Desert in winter, people who were jailed for a single tweet, people whose families were thrown in prison because of their political activity. So these stories put the relatively minor restrictions on campus speech in perspective. But the American commitment to unfettered speech, unrivaled even by our democratic allies in Europe, stands as a beacon of inspiration to the world's dissidents, one of the few features of the American brand that still commands global admiration. More than one speaker at the forum singled out speech codes and other restrictions on expression in the United States as a worrisome development. The final reason that free speech is fundamental to civilized societies, and one that is the most relevant to perhaps this kind of venue, an American college, is that free speech is inseparable from the mission of higher education. Today's universities are racked with debates on curricula, admissions, funding, pedagogy, sexuality, and much else. And all of them ultimately hinge on an understanding of what colleges and universities are for. As the song says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But I've often been astonished at how professors, deans, and even college and university presidents can't come up with a coherent statement about what the mission of a university or a college is. When called upon to do so, they go all misty and babbling in incoherent platitudes. A good example is a recent best-selling book by the literary critic William Deresiewicz called Excellent Sheep, When excerpted in the New Republic, it became the most read article in the century-long history of that magazine. In that scathing critique of elite colleges and universities, Deresiewicz ventures that the goal of a university education is for students to, quote, build a self, which he explicates as follows. Quote, it is only through the act of establishing communication between the mind and the heart, the mind and experience, that you become an individual, a unique being, a soul. This vision, to the extent that I can make sense of it, is troubling. I've been a professor for more than 3 decades, but I have no idea how to get students to acquire a self or to build a soul. Sorry. They don't teach it in graduate school, and we've never evaluated a candidate for hiring or promotion by how well he or she can accomplish it. Indeed, if acquiring a self has something to do with adult responsibility, moral sophistication, or the ability to reason through the inherent conflicts in the human condition, contemporary colleges and universities are falling over themselves to prevent students from acquiring one. The students at elite colleges and universities today are encouraged to prioritize music, athletics, and other form of recreation over their academic duties. They may be disciplined by an administrative board with medieval standards of jurisprudence, pressure to sign a kindness pledge that's suitable for kindergarten, muzzled by speech codes that would not pass the giggle test if challenged on First Amendment grounds, and publicly shamed for private emails that express controversial opinions. In any case, the commonly expressed idea that a university education is a form of soulcraft is not as anodyne as it first seems. In fact, I find it kind of creepy. Because it licenses moralistic propaganda and a condescending disregard for students' critical faculties. I say that student souls are none of our business. A concern with soulcraft distracts us from a more coherent, defensible, and practicable understanding of the mission of a college or university, one in which free speech is an inseparable part. Let me be specific. Though I profess no ability to shape the souls of my students, I think there are some things that I and my colleagues are qualified to do. It seems to me that educated people should know something about the 13 billion year prehistory of our species and the basic laws governing the physical and living world, including our bodies and brains. Students should grasp the timeline of human history from the dawn of agriculture to the present. They should be exposed to the diversity of human cultures and the major systems of belief and value with which people have made sense of their lives. They should know about the formative events in human history, including the blunders we can hope not to repeat. They should understand the principles behind democratic governance and the rule of law. They should know how to appreciate works of fiction and art as sources of aesthetic pleasure and as impetuses to reflect on the human condition. On top of this knowledge, a liberal education should make certain habits of rationality second nature. Educated people should be able to express complex ideas in clear writing and speech. They should appreciate that objective knowledge is a precious commodity and know how to distinguish vetted fact from superstition, rumor, and unexamined conventional wisdom. They should know how to reason logically and statistically, avoiding the fallacies and biases to which the untutored mind is vulnerable. They should think causally rather than magically and know what it takes to distinguish causation from correlation and coincidence. They should be acutely aware of human fallibility, most notably their own, and appreciate that people who disagree with them are not necessarily stupid or evil. Accordingly, they should appreciate the value of trying to change minds by persuasion rather than by intimidation or demagoguery.